Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Tanisha Camillo Sheffy, founder and director of Made Incubator, revolutionizing the way designers learn, build, and succeed in fashion. And we want to thank our sponsor, A Maven's World, and also New York Life for being a corporate vendor of this series. We are so excited to have you, and our industry experts are really ready to mobilize your business. So ask the questions, don't be shy, and follow us on Instagram at Made Incubator. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Tanisha and I are really excited for this discussion today. Thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to be hosting this Entrepreneurship Empowerment Series event during Black Business Month. The purpose of this series is to connect, inspire, and mobilize minority businesses to get the resources they need to scale. This virtual series is presented by Made Incubator, revolutionizing the way designers learn, build, and succeed in fashion. Today's event is sponsored by A Maven's World lifestyle brand, building brands, empowering entrepreneurs, and making mavens. Thank you so much again, everyone. If you are excited to be here, please put some clapping hands and praising hands in the chat. We'd love to see it. Thank you for showing up for yourself and your brand today. My name is Raina Jacques, and I am your hostess. I'm an attorney by trade at Sunstein. I work as a trademark litigation associate attorney right here in downtown Boston, but I'm also a creative director and an entrepreneur as well. So without further ado, let's go on and get started. I want to introduce you to the fearless leader, Malia Lazu. She has been a pioneer in the entrepreneurship and innovation space and an award-winning strategist in diversity and inclusion. Her most recent role as EVP and Regional President at Berkshire Bank, Malia evolved the 13 billion bank strategy focused beyond community banking services to prioritize tangible community impact. Welcome, Malia, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and hello, everyone, and shout out to A Maven's World and Tanisha. It's always wonderful to see us come together.
Absolutely. That is so true. And please, I know I just gave a wonderful introduction, but please tell us about yourself and the impactful work that you do.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I think, if someone were to ask me to describe myself in a couple of words, I would say I'm a community organizer. My reason, I think, for being in this lifetime was really to, help support on and love on communities that are excluded, including my own, being a Black woman. It helps myself as well, right? But really, I started my career when I was 19 years old, and I started a nonprofit called Mass Vote, which is still around. If you're in the Massachusetts area, wow, you should check it out and support it. And that really put me on this journey of becoming a community organizer. And so from there, I moved to DC. I was 25. I graduated Emerson College. And I ran Mass Vote for several years, and then I got a job offer in DC. And in my mind, I thought, oh, this is the progression, right? You go from like local politics to state politics to national politics. And so it seemed like a natural place, right, for me to go after doing this work in Boston. And in many ways it probably was, but it's where I realized that like national politics wasn't my thing. Right. That like, yes, I wanted to help get communities to vote because that was a tool of empowerment for all of us. But the national shell game of politics was not my thing. But while I was in DC, I met a man by the name of Harry Belafonte. And, the younger generations may not know of him, but he was actually the first person to sell 1 million records. He was the first Black man to win a Grammy, to win a Tony. He actually, Sidney Poitier was his understudy in theater, funny enough. I know, right? It's like,
that's exciting.
Yeah. But he sang that song, Day-O, Damn.
Yeah.
And it, you know, I mean, we don't know. It was so popular back then. Like Calypso
Yes.
was like the first album.
I love Harry Belafonte. I
Right. So
certainly
you know him. See, you're one of right. Right. You know. But you know, I understand not everyone has to keep up with all the history, right? So, but he was also this true activist. You know, he bought Martin Luther King his house. He bought Martin Luther King life insurance so that Coretta Scott King wasn't, you know, in poverty. He sort of saw the writing on the wall, right? And was like, okay, if he is going to be killed, right? And was thinking about how do we protect his family, right?
Wow.
And because of that, he was blacklisted, you know, and so working for him really helped me see what it takes to actually do work that has impact when you have some power, right? He had some power and he used it. And that's why, right, like everyone loves him and, you know, artists talk about him, right? And seeing him. So working for him was just this incredible experience. And we were working with gang members around the country, helping them start legitimate businesses. So it was this incredible experience. And then it brought me into the business world. So rather than letting a long story go on any longer, I'll just say that, you know, really my journey has been one of like meandering with purpose and, you know, just knowing that I wanted to do things that were going to help people and that were going to help like not even help people, but we're dope. You know what I'm saying? Like we're so dope. And I just wanted, you know, places where people could see that, where we could come together and live our power because we do have power, regardless of what the institutional, you know, stuff says, right? When we get together, we free ourselves. And so I've been blessed to have had communities let me do that for, I'm not going to say how many years, but many years. And now I'm, you know, working with banks like State Street, you know, working with developers like Redgate, really helping them tie a DE&I intention into business impact. So we believe when you become more diverse and when you become more inclusive, you're going to make more money. And that's sort of how we move forward with our clients.
That is amazing. And I find that turning point to be such an amazing shift, especially in the local communities, especially essentially evangelizing business in the local communities can be more impactful sometimes than on a national level. So it's amazing how you have been so much a part of that in this space.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's being able to be around intergenerational.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I think that's really like if I were to, you know, not to start giving like lessons already, you know, but I'm of anti-age, I'm allowed. You know, you're going to pivot, you're going to learn, but stick with this intergenerational approach. You know, talk with people who have been there, who have done that, who have lost it all, who have regained it, right? You don't, I think, you know, whether it was seeing, you know, this very older institution in DC, right? And like seeing politics and then be like, oh, that's not my bag. And like, listen, there are people in there killing it. And that's great. We need folks in there doing it. It just wasn't my bag. And then to, you know, see Harry and be like, oh, wow, you know, here I'm working for this very progressive person and we're starting businesses, right? Which really see, you know, and to now be in business, right? So, you know, I think that just being open to the journey, if it feels right, like for me, if my heart was happy, then I was happy. And I suggest that that's a great criteria to live your life.
That's so powerful. And I think when you said that, if my heart is happy, then the business is happy. It's so important how we approach our business in our full selves and not from an empty cup. You know, to burnout's going to come, but at least we know how to deal with it when it does come, because we can only show up for our best selves. That's the only way that our business can get the best version of itself, and the people that we serve and the communities that we serve to be able to get the best version of the business itself, or the fruits of the business.
That's exactly right, right? You being happy, right? I mean, even if you have a business choice and if you don't need the money, right? Like I get like, you know, when you're a startup, every client's a great client, right? And I don't Although I may disagree a little bit with that, I get that sentiment, right? But as someone who has gotten to burnout twice, right? And I think it's also part of this narrative that's capitalistic, right? Like, so I think we want to also know, like, we're building the new capitalism for the US, right? So if we can't work our heart space into it, if we can't work our even, our own happiness into it, then we're not going to be able to build a thriving business and thriving company. And as you said, like, things are going to come, right? Like, people are going to try to steal your joy anyway. So at least try to, like, start with joy. And, I had this, I call him, like, one of my white boy advisory. I have this, like, advisory board of white boys, and they, like, just sort of help me know what the white boys are thinking, right? And how white boys are going to be. And I was thinking about these deals, and, one had a little bit more money, but, so I was kind of leaning that way. And he was like, "But what one would be more fun?" And I had never been asked that question in a strategy meeting before,
I would never think of that. Really wouldn't.
And I was like, "Well, I would enjoy doing this one more." And he's like, "Great. So then that's the one you do." And, it was this, this place of privilege, right? Because I was coming from, and at the time I was younger, I still had a lot more scarcity mentality, right? Like, in myself. And so he sort of gave me permission to be like, you'll find the 50 grand somewhere else, right? Like, I mean, are you really going to not pick something that'll bring you joy? And, so yeah, I think, this is entrepreneurship empowerment. I know we're talking about community and belonging, but all of those things, you have to have an open heart. And I know for me, I do ritual, like, I have someone, like, I have a therapist, but that's just because of life, right? I had her before I started my business, and may I have her long after. I'm sorry?
Someone to keep you grounded.
Someone to keep me grounded, right? But I also have, like, I want to call this person, like, a spiritual energy, like, not energy, like, as in Reiki, although I think Reiki's great work too, but just someone who helps me think about what are the rituals that I need to stay grounded with my ancestors, right? With my vision, with my connectivity with humanity.
Right.
And it's a part of, everyone knows about it, right? They're like, "Oh, Malia's, meeting with Jabron. She's gonna, she's gonna be out for a few hours." And this allows me, I think, to, again, have that outside permission, where especially sometimes women, we think we need to take it all, and we think we need to, the idea of putting something down is a failure, and so like, have a therapist, but also, if you're a part of the church, like, talk to your pastor about it. If you're a part of a spiritual drum circle, like, whatever it is, bring your need to be joyful at work to that place, to let them help you, right? To let people who know how to feed your soul, to let them help you do that as part of the work. This is part of your work. You'll make more money if you do that once a month, guaranteed.
Absolutely. And you never know where that inspiration might stem from. It could be just from that ritual, or inviting even more insight into your business space. And that community is empowering. Speaking of community, what does community and belonging mean to you? And how do you balance? How do you keep your fingers on the pulse of business and community efforts at the same time?
Whoa. Do I? I mean, that, like, at the same time, I mean, no, that's such a great question. So I want to start with community, because I think, community as a definition is something that's really being redefined, right? So I think before, because of technology, community was about proximity, right? And so it was overarching about proximity. So I was going to keep my neighborhood happy, right? Because that was my community, right? It was my church. It was the one, it was the school we went to, right? We weren't able to travel, or even now, you don't even have to travel to make friends around the world. And, in the 90s, I think, as sort of an outcome to the victories of the civil rights movement, really. What we saw was this idea of culture becoming a community, right? So I am a house head, right? I am a hip hop head. I am an LGBTQ, right? Because before, if you were anywhere near the queer community, you probably weren't saying that to your neighbor, right? You probably didn't have an LGBT community in your town, right? So now I'm able to identify as that. I'm able to find that community, and that might not be in location. So I like to say that community is a physical, as in it's you can touch it, you can feel it, you're in your community, right? But you identify community in different ways than I think we had in the 20th century. I think in the 21st century, I can have a community of, left-handed lesbian skateboarders, and I can now like find my community and like be that and be reaffirmed and affirmed by that. And that's really what I think the importance of community is, right? It's a place where you're affirmed. It's a place where you thrive, right? It's a place where you feel that you, to the second word, belong, right? And belonging, the way I look at belonging is, a place where like you walk in and you go to the refrigerator, right? Like where you don't feel the need to ask, right? And in a lot of ways in our communities that we had before, you may have been in community and not felt like you belonged, right? You may have been going to a church because that's what everyone did. And you sat and you listened to, them criticize, you because you're a sexually active woman or, right? Like whatever it might be. And you just sat there, right? And now I think you can actually choose communities that you belong in, and especially at work. And, we talk about building space, right, at work for our hearts and the hearts of our employees, right? And the hearts of, the hearts of folks even our customers, like there's a lot of work I do with my customers that just holds their heart, right? And I'm able to do that because I have mine held, right? So, belonging, I mean, in Boston, right, I would say it's like Cheers, right? It's that place where everyone knows your name. What has happened, especially in business, is that we've concentrated a lot on diversity and inclusion. So we've been like, oh my God, there's like Black people. We should bring them in. And so then we invite them in, but we haven't, the business hasn't really done anything to make them feel that they belong, right? So you walk in and you're like, oh, wow, I'm the Black person here, right? Like, and people are asking me about my hair, and people are asking me about, fried chicken, or, whatever the microaggressions are, right?
Or we're forced to educate on our own experiences and strife, which is exhausting.
Right. So we end up being microaggressed just to make our check, right? And so belonging means that doesn't happen. But if it happens, I can ask you about it, right? So if someone does say like, oh my God, can I touch your hair? Right? Like you actually feel comfortable enough to be like, no, and you shouldn't say that in public because this is why, right? And the person wouldn't be like, oh my God, I feel so bad. Tears, right? But would be like, thank you for letting me know. I don't want to be out here looking ignorant, right? Like that's what belonging looks like. Or, or us being like, oh my God, like, like this is what we're learning, right? About you all, right? It's about curiosity and not that nosy sort of, curiosity for gossip, but that curiosity of straight up, like, I want to know about who you are because that will make in my knowing you, I become a better person.
And I think that's great. I think that even in the midst of community, whether we are in our own communities or in a different community, it's so important to get sponsors and allies, right? So that intersection of, I know where I come from, I know where I belong, but I'm curious to know, how your background or how your community can be impactful and with minds together, and we can create something amazing, or there's something that I can learn from this. Has that been your experience? Do you have allies or any sponsors that help you get the ball rolling?
Oh my gosh, sponsors and allies are so important, and attract them. Don't go out and get them.
Right.
Right? Attract them. And also know what someone needs to do in your life and what they don't, right? So I have been very blessed. I mean, I had early sponsors. I wanted to have a hip hop concert in Boston Common back in 1995. Don't do the math. Don't do the math. And because I already told you, whatever. I was a genius. I was
just
5
put this
years
right
old.
here. That's a movie.
And so, and I couldn't get a permit because Boston was like, we don't do hip hop concerts. And so I was, crying or whatever. And then this woman said to me, hey, there's this guy, and he did Bob Marley's last concert in the US here. And his name's George Pillsbury. Like, you should totally like meet him and talk to him. So I like go and meet him because I think he's going to help me with a concert. But he ends up being my first sponsor. Right. Wow. And, I didn't know. Right. I mean, I heard Pillsbury, but it like didn't dawn on me that like his family was actually the Biscuits. And because he was already educated, right? So he was already a 60s, anti-Vietnam. He ran guns for, the Black Panthers, right? Like he was, he was a down white boy, right? We could say.
He was in the mix.
He was already in the mix. So he knew how to open doors for me, right? And he knew like, Malia, we're going to bring you here and you're going to meet this and that. And I would also see, because he had privilege, right? I would see when we got in certain rooms, even though he wasn't I'm this, generationally wealthy guy, he actually is part of a book called Robin Hood Was Right. They gave most of their money away. Yes. But I would see where they'd be like, yeah, well, don't forget Yale, right? And I would see like this. And so I also got close to that, right? And I got to see what that looks like when, wealthy white guys, straight white guys get together, right? Like, right. And so he really, helped me be in a lot of different spaces. So, at 19, 20, I'm like comfortable, right? Like sitting down with generationally wealthy people, right? I'm comfortable with that. And I see us as equals. And, so I've had, that's, one experience. But also I had to speak to another one where there was this woman that I wanted to be my sponsor. And I went after her. And to this day, she still loves me. But she wasn't going to be the person who was going to sponsor me, and she, I'll still reach out to her to this day, right? But what the relationship I wanted from her was one that she was not going to give me. And I think, it's important to, just realize like the universe has a plan and it might not be the plan that you think it is. And so if you think like, oh my God, like I need to get Tanisha as a sponsor and I need her help, like, yes, but Tanisha may already have 6 folks who she's sponsoring. Right. And so if she asks you to call someone else, or if someone else comes into your life, that's probably what is supposed to happen, So I look back, she had given me advice to not work for Harry Belafonte, right? Like, so I look back at it, probably was best that she wasn't, she didn't have this real, because I may have listened to her. Right. Yeah. Like, and I may have not had the experiences I had, so sponsors are great. Mentors are great. Also peer to peer. And this is where I think like we really like, this is the real talk, right? Like it's great for someone to help and someone will help and someone will come to help and all those things are great. The day-to-day money on your table, the day-to-day love that you will get is from your community, is from your peers, right? So like as a small business, as many cents and dollars as you can spend with your peer group, right? Like I see that you do trademarking, right? Like, and I'm like, oh, well, good. So now we're going to talk, right? Like, because I have this great woman of color trademarking attorney, but she's in Florida, right? Like, so let's, like you want to spend your money with your people and you want to build this sort of ecosystem because, again, it's us, right? We are the ones we have been waiting for ourselves. Yes. And so rather than waiting for some rich, some moment to happen and you're discovered and like, it doesn't happen that way. Right. And so, get that peer-to-peer mentorship, right? Get that peer-to-peer advice. Like I have friends of mine, some are older, some are younger. that are so much better at things than I am.
Mhm.
Right? Like, and we
Mhm.
grab drinks, and it's that there's a different power dynamic there, right? Because we're
Right.
peers. And so, definitely build that as much as you build your sponsorship and mentorship, right? Because all of a sudden they get a deal,
Mhm.
right? And they're like, shoot, like Google just called, I need some stuff. And you already have been in contact. So, you already know how to work together, so do all the things.
That is so true. And I think about it like across. So I think about networking vertically, I think about networking horizontally, and you're covered. And, let's not forget the bottom of that cross. So that means that, we have a responsibility to those that are coming up behind and beside us as well, that, we didn't get here by ourselves. I certainly didn't get here by myself, and grateful for the person that was able to grab me up and bring me up in the fourth space. So why not be able to be that resource and that person for the person beside me or behind me,
Right.
right?
And because it helps you, right? Like when you do that, you learn things about yourself, right? You learn things about what the struggle looks like today that it didn't look like 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 20 years ago, right? Like
Yes.
you're able to build your ecosystem. I mean, if I were to say one of the things that I'm the most proud of in my life is that I have people that I'm working with today that I was working on Mass Vote with.
Wow.
And one of them actually, like, she doesn't even live in the state. Like, like we're now in banking together. Like that's how much our lives have grown and changed, right?
Right.
But whenever there's ways for us to lift each other up, we do that, right? And I think that's really that's when all is said and done, it's not the money, it's it's not any of that, right? It's what people say, how you've helped them, right? What people feel, and I've been to places where, I mean, I was just at this like huge festival, right? The Roots picnic, like, 60,000 people, whatever it was. And like, I run into two folks from Boston. Both of them were part of the accelerator. And like this sister looked at me and she was like, you helped us put food on our table. Like I'm getting choked up now, but like,
Wow, I'm getting goosebumps. The world is so small.
it's so small. And like to have that be what she said, like that we work together to build an economy, you know what I mean? To like just figure out how to build our own economy because we didn't think Boston was going to do it.
Yes.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's the work, that's the work. And I think we don't talk about that stuff a lot, right? When we tell the narratives, we're like, oh my God. So, Jay-Z wanted me to run his fund and now I'm right. But like, really, there are things that you and your community can do together.
Wow.
That none of those folks can actually help you do. And that is probably what you actually need to do, right? Because whatever they're doing for you, they're doing for them because it's about them.
Yeah.
And no shade, right? I mean, it's like we said before, right? We need to center ourselves. Yeah. So, anyway, I'm
Oh no, we love it.
Rambling.
We love this. We certainly love this. I have my colleague, actually, Lynn, who says belonging is so important and you can feel the difference. Peer-to-peer is critical. Yes, Lynn, absolutely.
You can, right? We have all been to a party that you got there and you said, oh, I really wasn't invited here. Right. I mean, it's how we feel walking into some of the walking into some neighborhoods, right? It's how we feel walking into corporate America, right? Like, Lynn, thank you so much for that because it feels, you feel it.
Yes, you do. How does that influence your clients and the business goals that you have with Urban Labs?
So, I like to say that like what I realized when I started my business was that I was going to have to make a decision about, was I centering the community that I was serving or was I centering my client? And, because if I was going to center my client, then their feelings of belonging, I would need to center. And what I realized was that I couldn't do my job properly. I mean, I could get checks, but I couldn't do my job properly if I was worried about their feelings. Now, not that I'm going to want to be like, oh, white supremacy, right? Like, not like that, but that white discomfort, right? Which is always something that slows the work. You know, I don't care if it's in fashion, I don't care what industry it is. You go into a company, if they start feeling uncomfortable, they start slowing down work that progresses, right? So you start hearing questions like, well, are we going to hire less qualified people, right? When really women are some of the most qualified people on the planet, right? Women of color are the most educated right now, right? Like, and women of color are often overqualified for the jobs they're holding currently.
We are
So
running
actually,
circles.
like, right?
We are running circles around
Correct,
everybody
right?
else.
So that very question centers the discomfort white people feel, right? And so, you know, what I decided to do was that I was going to center my community. Again, like, I need my heart to be happy, right? Like, and if I'm like, it's okay, you're okay, like, I would start drinking, right? Like, I would become a miserable person.
Right.
And so, you know, what I find with work is that there's definitely some clients who, you know, who after working with them, you know, I think we both agreed that they need more of a traditional, you know, like, let's do trainings and I want to check boxes. And there's great DE&I people that do that, and there's room for that. But I've also been really blessed to have a bunch of clients who doubled our contract. And I think part of it, especially with people in power, they know when you're being authentically honest, right? And especially, like, yes, there's a lot of white fragility, but there's also some folks, like I say, like Harry Belafonte's one, like, he's very comfortable in his power. Like, you're not going to take it from him. He's Harry Belafonte, right? Like, you know, you can bring in the new youngin', he'll still take the girl. Like, he's not, right? Like, he's not worried about nothing.
Right.
And you do see that with some CEOs as well. And those are the ones that, you know, end up leaning in and doubling the contract and actually really being appreciative that when I say this feels white, or this feels male, or this feels straight, or this feels able-bodied, that I can say that and then sit there and, like, be like, so what are you going to do about it? Right. Like, and, you know, I think it's why the work we do is so successful, you know, is because we're actually honest. And, like, for those CEOs who don't want to be surrounded by yes men, this is one of the places where, you know, real honesty is going to do you a whole lot of good. And, you know, so I have found that being able to, in my work with my clients, that the best work we do is when I'm actually being honest about feelings. And, you know, we have an all woman team. We are, you know, I do need to get a man in, I guess, somewhere to be, you know, but hopefully, you know, it'll be a trans, you know, someone, we need to have flavor. We can't just have a regular
a little bit of,
relationship. But, you know, we have a lot of women of color on my team, right? So the minute they walk in, or, you know, like they're like, okay, this doesn't feel comfortable, right? And so we have our own lenses that we can bring to our client. And I think that's also very helpful, you know, because I get handed, like, these employee surveys, right, that are done by these huge firms, right? And, you know, they break everything down, and I'll look at it and I'll be like, the Black people don't, right? Because you see how they answer things, right? So they'll be like, yes, diversity and inclusion, and then teamwork will get a 0, right? Like, and you'll be like, okay, they don't feel included. They know, they knew they were supposed to answer that, the diversity part, right? Like, and so it just, I think, you know, for me, having decided that I'm not going to do this business if I have to do it centering whiteness, and centering my clients, which now they're not all white, right? We all have our own problems, which we can talk about amongst ourselves. That could be a whole another empowerment entrepreneurship series. But, you know, majority white, that we don't center them. And I think that, you know, it makes me feel good doing the work, right? Because you don't feel good, right, when you're needing to compromise your own humanity. And so not having to do that, and understanding that it might mean my business model is I lose 50% of my clients a year, right? Like, thank God it's not anywhere near that high. But if it gets to be that'll be the problem, right? Like, because I'm not going to change. And I think, you know, for me, there's a lot of DE&I out there that is very superficial. And so if that's where they want to go, you know, they can do that. And, you know, I'll come and be a paralegal for you, sis, if it stops working.
Listen, we are not here to censor ourselves or to center ourselves around anyone. We're here to revolutionize, right? So that means as soon as we wake up in the morning, my perspective is valuable. Your perspective is valuable. So let's get to the root of the issues. You know what I mean? So what's the point of it all if we're going to be hide behind technology or surveys or whatever the case may be? Let's disrupt. Let's talk about it. It doesn't mean I rather someone who is the complete opposite of me, opinion wise, decision wise, appearance wise. Just give it to me straight. I can still learn from that person. I can instead of just sort of riding the wave of like, that's great, I love what you're saying, this sort of facade, but I can still learn from someone who completely disagrees with me in politics, in conversation, in mindset, in spirituality, all of it. I want to disrupt. I don't.
That's
I don't
it. It's like,
want-
as long as you're like, we have a no asshole policy.
right.
And like, that's the only line that we draw. Like, if you're coming here to be mean,
Mhm.
then no, right? Like, we're not going to do this. But, and it's funny that you say, even if we disagree politically, because the guy, and again, another sponsor, one of the sponsors who brought me into a bank and, brought me into the C-suite and made me an EVP and a regional president, was a conservative white guy. Like, if you had looked at his CV, he was an NRA member. He was from upstate New York, right? Like, you wouldn't have thought that he would have brought me into the bank and then let me do, we did no consideration loans, right? We were doing lines of credit with BECMA and other folks. And you would have thought like the person who let me do that was some progressive, right? Like, da-da-da-da-da. No, but it was actually an NRA member, white guy.
Wow.
Right. But through us talking, right? Like, and he got, again, there is a side of a conservative, right? If they're not trying to be mean, that actually really gets the fact that we're not expanding the pie, right? Like, and like, he got that. Like, he was like, oh yeah, if you all have no money, then how can you build business? And if you can't build business, then how do you make more money? And then how do we bank you?
Right.
Right. So it wasn't even necessarily this like woke logic. Now, what I will say is 2 years after working together, he was very educated, right? And he was probably one of the strongest allies that I've seen, right? And again, he didn't all of a sudden sell all his guns, right? But who belonged in his tribe expanded, right? Who belonged in his community expanded. And he started seeing how his community was being treated, right? Because my whole team was, people of color, LGBTQ, right? So he started seeing how we get treated, right? At restaurants, when we're traveling, when we're, at places. And so that proximity, is important. And the disruption is critical now more than ever.
Absolutely.
What we have is not working. Can I also say this too? This is what I love about young people. And like, if, we have all these octogenarians, I think, what did Jon Stewart say? Like, they're living until 200, right? Like, we have all these ancient folks who are on all the levers of power, and young people are very clear about the different world that they want and that they're actively working towards, like this idea that they just want avocado toast or whatever, like our generation, like we weren't doing our own stupid stuff, like people forget as they get older and they get bitter, but what young people are doing in the workplace. I mean, why we have the Crown Act, why we have, you look at Ayanna Pressley, right? Our amazing Congresswoman, Ayanna Pressley, like AOC, right? You look at our younger generations who have so much more courage to fight for this. And I just want to say, like, I'm so happy that I'm in this lifetime to like watch these young folks and whatever I can do to support, because the earth you're inheriting needs disruption and needs change. And it's good that you guys are working on it before you're, before you're too old, but just, message to to the young people, like, thank you for being disruptive in your heart, and don't let anyone take that away from you, because you see the mess you end up in when that happens.
And we're not hiding behind our desks anymore. Where we see our value, we know that we're valuable. We know that the spaces that we're in needs a fresh facelift. We know it. We know it. It's been like this since Jesus was born, and I know there's a reason why I was hired. I know there was a reason why I'm coming into, or you hired me, or you wanted my input, or you wanted to be my client, or you wanted to align yourself with my business. So, you know, we're seeing that value now. And I think that companies are really seeing that value now too. And I think that's super amazing. What is a personal experience? I know that you've shared so many amazing gems so far, but what is a personal experience that you can share with us that impacted your approach to inclusivity?
Oh, okay. There's so many, but you know, I'm working on a book out next spring called From Intention to Impact with MIT. Yes. And so that actually, you know, you have to like think about specific, right, stories to like put in the book and stuff like that.
Right.
And so I'm going to tell a story from that. Wait, I have to get my sip of water.
Drop the praise hands for the book in the chat, please.
Thank you. Right.
Getting the exclusive.
And it's called From Intention to Impact, a practical guide to DE&I.
Wow.
But one of the stories I was thinking about is I was in Alabama doing filming a pilot for this TV show that never went anywhere. But there was like lights, camera, action. It was all very, I'm saying set up, but you know, it was like set up so that, you know, folks from the North were coming down to the South, right? And we were going to find a way to get to, you know, find our whatever, kumbaya. Great idea. Until we like got down there and, you know, just really realized like, do we want to kumbaya with these folks? Right? Like, what are we really talking about? And I got to that point. Not everyone was lovely and respectful and wonderful. But one of the guys, he had this Confederate flag hanging. Now, it wasn't like flying on some flagpole. It was like tacked to the side of his house, you know, like in a carport or whatever.
Yeah.
And like I saw it, and I'm in Alabama on these like roads that I'm sure like Black people have been run off of and lynched and all of this stuff. And I want to just go home. Like, I don't want to, I'm like, you know, so like, I don't need to be a martyr. I'm not, you know, big enough to be a martyr anyway. I will just be one of those missing people in Alabama. And I really just wanted to go home. And all of a sudden I said, I'm going to ask him. I'm going to ask him what he thinks of that flag. And I said, you know, can you tell me why you have that flag up? And he's like, it's my Southern heritage. And, you know, so I said, well, what does that mean, your Southern heritage? And he's like, well, we're rebels and, you know, this and that. And I said, well, what do you think when you say you're a rebel? How do you think I feel when you say that? Right? Because I'm thinking you lynch, right? Like that's what I'm thinking when you say I'm a rebel. And he looked me dead in the eye and almost like I pained him by like tying him to that. And he said, my family was too poor to own slaves. It doesn't mean that for us. And the revelation that came to me when he said that was, this is the same stuff when someone says to me up in Boston, I'm not a racist.
Right.
Right. The point is that just because you didn't own slaves, if that was the least you did, if the least you did during slavery was not own them, then you have failed your time on this earth. Right? You failed the time. If the least you did was not own one, that is woefully inadequate for the time of slavery. The adequate response is being a part of the Underground Railroad, right? Like the mediocre response is signing a petition or whatever they did back then, right? Like, but to just not own them. And for me, it really helped how I look at how white people see inclusion, right? And like this idea of, well, it's not me and I didn't do it. And even though, you know, I've always known that they had this cognitive dissonance, you know, I guess maybe because it was extreme, like slavery, right? Like the idea that you just be like, you know, like, oh, well, you know, I don't own slaves, so I'm one of the good ones. And like think that, and people probably did say that back then, right? People were probably like, I'm not a slave owner, right? Like,
Not
And
enough.
so, yeah, so that's, that's a personal story. And, what I will also say is there was a couple people on that trip that, one woman in particular on that trip that I would actually reach out to again.
Mm,
And so as we were saying, right, differences, but that experience for me, it just really highlighted like, wow, we really don't get each other.
right.
We really don't.
And it just shows that we just have so much work to do. Thank you so much for sharing that. And before I ask this next question, I would definitely like everyone, every entrepreneur, business person, professional, to drop your social media handles in the chat as well. We want to collaborate with each other, okay? So we want to see you. We want to know who you are. We want to collaborate. So please definitely drop your social media handles. And what is any advice that you can give to our minority entrepreneur folks?
Love yourself, do everything it takes to love yourself. And then everything else will fall into place. And I know it's like, oh, is that all? But like, I really feel like you have to be in certain places to do any of the other advice.
Yeah.
Right. But when we were running our accelerator and we took 130, primarily it was like 80% was minority businesses. We got 35 to market, right? I mean, Fresh Food Generation, Trillfit, right? Some great companies.
Wow.
And what I saw with all of them was us needing to work through our scarcity mentality, us needing to work through, well, I can't go on my own because I might lose everything, right? I'm not a business person. I bet, my family's not in business. It's not for me, right? And we take ourselves out of the running before we're even disqualified, right? And that again gets back to the loving of yourself. I mean, the amount of people when, I was at the bank when PPP loans came out, and we were the first bank in Massachusetts to do non-customer PPP loans. And we partnered with Amplify Latinx and the LGBTQ Chamber and BECMA and, all of our ecosystem to make sure people were getting their PPP loans. The amount of people that were like, oh yeah, no, I'm not going to get it. And I was like, no, you let them tell you, right? Like, you don't put yourself out of the running.
Mm-hmm.
You let the running put you, and you might get put out of the running, right? We don't win everything.
Right.
But to put because this was basically a grant. No one was really, unless you like hadn't done your taxes. And if you hadn't, let's file your taxes tomorrow, sis, right? Like, and let's get you this. Like, everything we're not out of it. Like that, that's why we're still here. And I think sometimes like we have this amazing long-term resilience, but then we'll have short-term exhaustion or short-term,
Right.
whatever. Like we forget who we are in the short term, right? And we are magic. We are magic. We are magic. We are magic. So
Yes.
if we are, and I'm not saying it so then you can beat on me or any of that. I'm saying that our ancestors were. Go back, look at the books, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like go back at what we were doing in Ghana and in West Africa and in East Africa. I mean, just we were. So if we're that, then we got to get back to that. And then there would be we won't need a strategy because the universe will be working for us, So I guess that's my advice.
I love that. And I think it's about reframing your mindset. You talk a lot about this scarcity mindset or this place of lack. And I think for me personally as well, as soon as I reframed my mind, as soon as I said, you know what, I'm going to thrive this year, or, I'm going to actually do exactly what I came out here and was said to do. Things just rolls right in, when you speak it out into existence, but also when you speak the negativity out as well, it comes right back to you.
It comes right back. And we have gotten in a habit now, right? And I think this is, I mean, again, now I'm going to, go on a whole nother thing, but that's part of the work, right?
Right.
That's part of how this capitalism thing works. If I get you to think you're a victim, and so if the only way I know how to identify with you and you know how to identify with me is by you saying I'm a victim, so I need you to do this for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very it ends up becoming, a toxic space for us, right? And we end up just re-victimizing ourselves. And like, my grandmother always used to have this hilarious saying. She used to say, "Get off the cross, we need the wood." And it's something that like I say to myself and sometimes, people around me, because that's really what it's about, right? Like, get off the cross, we need the wood, and forget them, right? Like even oppression, like even when there was slavery, there was a group of people who said, "And what? I'm getting out of here."
Right.
Right? Like, and if they could do that back then when they literally had to get out of chains, yeah, no, we should be able to figure out how to get these cops off of our back collectively.
That is so deep. That is so deep. I do have a question here for you. And please, everyone who is watching from LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you are, please, if you have any questions, drop it in the chat for us so we can ask Malia today. This is from the Anime Beast. Oh, this is a high school student getting ahead of the curve. I love this. I go to Brook High School and I love the tech industry. How would I connect with someone in the tech industry to help lead my career?
I love that.
I love that.
I love that. So first and foremost, I'm not sure what you want to do in the tech industry. So I don't know if you can just maybe get a little specific and then I can get a little more specific. But now I'm just going to stay broad for you. So first and foremost, you want to find, is there like a community college or is there a college near you where you can go see, okay, who are the professors? Now, what's great about community colleges is that like MIT, like I'm a lecturer at MIT and like we teach at community colleges, right? Like, so you can find really competent people who are in tech close to you in a safe way. That's the other thing with you being a high school student. You can't just run off to conferences, but there's youth tech. I know here there's a program called Resilient Coders. I'm not sure if it's near where you are, but there are youth programs in tech like that you could find. The last thing that I would say is that you'd be amazed at how many people want to help young people who are as ambitious as like being on this, taking your Saturday to listen to this and figuring out what to do. And so, if there are people in tech, hit them up on Twitter, hit them up on LinkedIn. Like you'd be surprised that people will respond, The other thing I will say is, again, depending on where in tech, you could definitely like reach out to me and get specific. And then I could say like who at MIT, that's a resource I have that I will be more than happy to share with you. But I always say start local, start at the people who are going to meet you, believe in you, and then walk you into all the doors that they have. And I find community colleges to be a great place to do that because you get really good professors, in an accessible community. You don't have to like go all the way, to some big university. Normally community colleges are local, or if you have another local college near you. But I find those professors, they have a holistic view on the industry. They're helping their students get into tech. So they're going to be able to tell you wherever you want to go, who and how you should look at. And also don't forget, you and your friends can disrupt tech today, and then we have to follow you. So Anime Beast, that's also another suggestion.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for those gems. Definitely create it. If it doesn't exist, you have the mind. You can certainly create and fill that hole where we're lacking. But
that's right. And more of the future, like Anime Beast, like you, like, even though adults are telling you all the time that they know more than you, and with some things they do just because they've done it more and they're like, this is how you parallel park and whatever it might be, right? Like, but when it comes to ideas, no one is too young for a good idea. Right. No one is too young to disrupt. The Birmingham Children's March, there were 4-year-olds getting arrested for freedom. And when someone asked them, this little boy, he like didn't have teeth. And, and they said like he was losing it. You know what I mean? Like he was getting his adult teeth in or whatever, or his new teeth, whatever it was. And he said, Teetum, meaning freedom because of his teeth. He said, Teetum, That's how young they were, right? And the adults couldn't march then. They were in Birmingham. The adults would have been lynched. They would have lost their jobs. It had to be the kids who marched. And if you ever want to see an amazing, amazing story, look at that story, about the children, the Birmingham Children's March, because they were shooting these children with hoses. And these kids for 5 days or maybe 7 days, took that beating, took dogs, children now being bit. And so then Kennedy had to come on, and he had to say that statement that we were going to, start the process of integration. So, again, be in touch with how, I know everyone here, speaking for Tanisha, speaking for you, Raina, right? But we're here for you. And also you have everything you need to figure out your career. So just let us know where we can help, but definitely don't diminish what you want to do if you think you can't find the right mentor.
That is amazing. That is amazing, Malia. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. I truly enjoyed having this discussion with you, for sure. I've learned so much in just 50 minutes, an hour. And I'm sure that all of the folks watching today have so many gems to think about. I hope you have your notebooks out, honey. I hope you do. I hope that you are writing all of these bullet points down, and we appreciate you. We appreciate you for getting involved. We appreciate you for joining us. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to, how should our attendees reach out to you?
Yes. So all my socials are at Malia Lazu. So you can find that there personally. You can get me on email. lazu@mit.edu is probably going to be the easiest one to remember. And yes, or you can, just shout it out and the universe will tell me. No, I'm kidding. But please, we're all here to support one another. If you have an interest in in MIT and you're thinking about MBAs, whatever it might be, as we were saying before, community is places where you belong and where you thrive. And if it's a space where I'm at, you belong there, and I want to help you thrive. So please just, be in touch and let me know however I can help.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Made Incubator. Thank you to our event sponsor, Maven's World, for your continued support and commitment to our community. And be sure to join us every single Saturday of this month. We're going to have exciting conversations just like this, like we had today. And contact us, and you'll get all the resources that you need to scale your business. Okay. Thank you, Malia, and everyone have a wonderful Saturday. Bye now.